Tendency for Interpersonal Victimhood. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. I continue to bring clarity to individuals so that they understand what it is that they are dealing with. Too often, explanations about narcissism become lost either because they're shrouded in esoteric terms, and often ones which are meaningless, that cause individuals to think to themselves, but what does that actually mean? For instance, one which is one of my pet hates is narcissistic supply. What does that actually mean? Instead, a far better term, as you know, is fuel. That tells you what it does. You understand what fuel is. You know that you fuel your car. You fuel yourself in eating food. You fuel a fire. You fuel an argument. You know that it creates and gives energy too. And therefore the explanation that a narcissist receives fuel from the responses of other people and actions of other people occasioned by the narcissist's conduct makes it far clearer for your understanding. Accordingly, wrapping up narcissism with esoteric explanations doesn't help you understand what it is, and certainly doesn't help you understand how it manifests in the behaviours that you experience. Of course, there is the other side of matters where, in effect, narcissism is described as something else, which makes it seem in a way less dangerous, less harmful, less abusive than it actually is. For instance, the unpleasantness of engaging in the shelving dynamic, whereby an individual is interacted with and then put on the shelf and then left there, is described as ghosting. People understand what ghosting means, and of course, ghosting can be done by people who are not narcissists, but it often is behaviour that is meted out by a narcissist. And therefore, it causes people to think, well, maybe they'll get back in touch. I'll keep messaging them to see if they will reply to me. Whereas if you realise that you're dealing with a narcissist and you obey the first golden rule of freedom, you'll stop wasting your time. Therefore, these alternative terms and euphemisms are as unhelpful as the esoteric ones. And that's why I created a lexicon, which may take a little while for you to familiarise yourself with it, but once you do, it enables you to understand the behaviours and apply them to what you have experienced. It gives you clarity. There, of course, will be instances where you will not grasp the behaviour of the narcissist, not because you're stupid, but because it's an alien concept to you. Often, how is it that someone can behave that way? This is clearly the case with individuals who struggle to get their head around the idea that the narcissist doesn't realise that they're telling lies, or that the narcissism causes a revision of history. But it is important for you to understand those concepts. As I often say, you don't have to like them, but you do have to understand them. Accordingly, as part of this mission of education, which results in the extension of my legacy, I seek out instances where phrases and terms are attributed to behaviour, which invariably is that of a narcissist. An article by Beth Elwood in Sci Post tells us, researchers identify a new personality construct that describes the tendency to see oneself as a victim. A new personality construct has been defined that defines people who persistently see themselves as victims within interpersonal conflicts. Already, you should be thinking, well, isn't that what narcissists do? It is. Remember, of course, non-narcissists may well see themselves as a victim within an interpersonal conflict, and therefore that behaviour of itself is an indicator and is not determinative. But somebody who persistently engages in this behaviour is more than likely to be a narcissist, because you are seeing that behavior repeatedly occurring in instances where it isn't actually applicable and happening over a sustained period of time, i.e., it's pathological and rooted within a particular perspective of the world. Study authors Rahav Gabe and team describe how the social world is satiated with interpersonal transgressions that are often unpleasant and seemingly unwarranted, such as being interrupted when speaking. While some people can easily brush off these moments of hurt, indeed, normal individuals, empathic individuals, others tend to ruminate over them and persistently paint themselves as victim. The authors present this feeling of being the victim as a novel personality construct that influences how people make sense of the world around them. The researchers call it the tendency for interpersonal victimhood, T.I.V, which they define as an ongoing feeling that the self is a victim, which is generalized across many kinds of relationships. The victim mentality that is evident, of course, in the relationship that a narcissist has with people. Through a series of 8 studies among Israeli adults, Gabe and associates sought to test the validity of the construct of T.I.V and explore the behavioral, cognitive, and emotional consequences of such a personality trait. An initial 3 studies established the T.I.V as a consistent and stable trait, i.e., it's deep-rooted, part of the psyche, that involves 4 dimensions. Moral elitism. Who is it that thinks they're superior to other individuals? The narcissist. A lack of empathy. The narcissist. The need for recognition. The narcissist. And rumination. That last one is not something that you will find with the narcissist. There might be the appearance of rumination, namely that a narcissist would say that they have been repeatedly thinking about a slight when actually they haven't, and there is a revision of history to say that to assert control over the listener. As I've explained elsewhere, on numerous occasions, once alone the narcissist does not sit there dwelling on the slight that has been occasioned, because that serves no purpose. Instead, it must be dealt with, and either the narcissist asserts control directly to deal with the slight, i.e. hoovering the person, or they will talk about it with somebody else, smearing the giver of the slight, and therefore the listener agrees with the narcissist that they've been hard done to, which then occasions a subconscious sense of control for the narcissist. The threat to control has been dealt with. Or the narcissist jettisons it, basically thinking that person is a horrible human being and they don't want to deal with them any longer. The narcissist does not sit there thinking about it over and over again. They may give the impression of that to somebody else, and therefore there is a distinction with regard to rumination. A follow-up study further found that this tendency for victimhood is linked to anxious attachment, an attachment style characterized by feeling insecure in one's relationships, suggesting that the personality trait may be rooted in early relationships with caregivers. Certain narcissists, of course, give the impression of feeling insecure in a relationship as a consequence of their need for control. Next, 2 studies offered insight into the cognitive profile of those with T.I.V. The studies had participants consider scenarios that involve another person treating them unpleasantly, either by having subjects read a vignette describing a partner giving them poor feedback, study 3, or by having subjects play a game that ended with their opponent taking a larger share of the winnings, study 4. Interestingly, the 2 studies found that those who scored higher on the measure of T.I.V were more likely to desire revenge against the person who wronged them. In study 4, this desire for revenge also translated into behavior. Those high in T.I.V were more likely to remove money from their opponent when given the chance. Sense of entitlement, appropriation of asset, lack of boundary control, nullification of threat to control, despite being told that this decision wouldn't increase their own winnings. Accordingly, focusing on the moment without due regard for collateral consequence. Participants high in T.I.V also reported experiencing more intense negative emotions and a higher entitlement to immoral behavior. Mediation analysis offered insight into how this revenge process unfolds. The higher participants' T.I.V., the more they experienced negative emotions and felt entitled to behave immorally. The suggestion there, of course, is that this is narcissism at work, that causes the narcissist to feel and think a particular way to motivate them to nullify the threat to control posed by the other person's behavior. Gabay and colleagues expressed that their studies indicate that a tendency for interpersonal victimhood is a stable personality trait that is linked to particular behavioral, cognitive, and emotional characteristics. Deeply rooted in the relations with primary caregivers, the researchers describe, this tendency affects how individuals feel, think, and behave in what they perceive as hurtful situations throughout their lives. Once again, that sounds just like the behavior of a narcissist, and particularly a mid-range one. The researchers suggest that T.I.V. as a construct offers a framework for understanding how a person's interpretation of social transgressions can inform feelings of victimhood and lead to revenge behaviors. These insights could inform therapeutic practices for treating such cognitive biases. The authors suggest that it would be particularly interesting for future studies to explore what happens when people high in T.I.V. are in positions of power. The researchers wonder whether leaders with this persistent tendency to see themselves as a victim might feel more inclined to behave in a vindictive way. Indeed, they do. You need only look at those narcissists that get themselves into positions of power, whether it's in middle management or ruling a country, and you'll see the consequences that flow from this. It is evident that much of what is described here is behavior that is applicable to the narcissist. Maintaining a victim mentality, which the narcissist has to do because that is what motivates them to nullify threats to control, predicated on a baseline of always needing that control, by seeing themselves as a victim in whatever shape or form, motivates a narcissist to then lash out, therefore asserting control, to complain, receiving sympathy, which would be an indirect assertion of control. And it is evident that the suggestion of T.I.V. really describes the behavior of narcissists, particularly those of a mid-range persuasion. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.